Hello, and welcome to today's Research into Action series. I'm Venessa Keesler. I'm an education research consultant working with Grand Valley Charter School Office to bring you this series where we review the key research on a wide variety of topics and help distill it and break it down so that you don't have to, as busy educators, school leaders, educational professionals. And today we are focusing on parent engagement for high poverty schools and communities. Before we move into that topic, I'll just remind you that the Grand Valley Charter School Office does their own research and makes it available to you. In support of research-based inquiry and to help gain a deeper understanding of Grand Valley's charter public schools, the Charter School Office conducts a wide range of research. You can find it at this QR code. And just another reminder as well, often the Charter School Office does surveys that are part of research. So if you're asked to participate in a survey, please do. It's a critical part of ongoing oversight, support, and building an evidence base to help all of us improve as educators. The other thing I'll remind us all before we jump into the topic, there are 3 things about research that I want to remind people whenever I do one of these. 1, research varies in quality. Some research is done really well, following the scientific process, peer review, all of that, and others it's just not. There's a lot of research that's done by interest groups or people who don't have the same level of training necessarily, and there's not, in the age of information dissemination, there's no reason that you wouldn't find that on a Google search as much as you'd find anything else, which again is one of the big reasons for things like this, because you don't have time to try to parse out, is this one peer reviewed or is this not? So that's why the Grand Valley Charter School Office wanted to make sure that you could get the best research on topics, high quality research, without having to figure all that out on your own. The second thing is a lot of research, especially in education, really only shows associations. We know when this changes, this also seems to change, but it doesn't show cause and effect. If you're going to show cause and effect, you have to use specific either experiments or other methodologies that help you say, we've removed all the other things that could have impacted this relationship, and we can prove that if you implement this program, it causes this change. You can probably guess why these are harder in education to set up. They do exist, but they're harder because it's unethical to withhold high quality education from a group of students and then see what happens. So a lot of times we have to study what's happening, just what is in the world, and understand what appears to be related. Both kinds of research are important. It's not that one is better than the other. It's just important to know if you're talking about correlational research or associations, or if you're talking about causal research, especially when educators are pushed to pick programs that are proven to work. So you just kind of want to understand that. And again, in these presentations, I usually try to delineate between, we've got cause and effect research, we've got association research. And the last thing is that research is science, so it's always evolving. We might go through some evidence today. More studies could happen in 6 months, it would be a different story, or a year or 2 years. So it's always important to keep refreshing, keep paying attention to this series, keep listening, and don't be surprised if more information emerges. With that, what are you going to learn today? We're going to talk a little bit about what the research says about engaging with families in general, and then we're going to talk about what the research says about key practices when you're working with diverse and underserved families. And for this, we're using a key resource. It's produced by the Institute for Education Sciences. This is, some of you have watched some of these videos where I talk about this. Institute for Education Sciences, IES, is the federal research agency, and they're charged with producing and disseminating high quality evidence for education. So when something is done by IES, this is a shortcut I would say to you. If it's come out of IES or the regional education laboratories, which is a part of IES, it's had to meet a lot of quality standards. And so it's a good shortcut to be like, well, this is probably pretty high quality research because it's been peer reviewed, there's requirements in law, there's a lot of pieces there, it's good science. And they produce a lot of things like research in brief or practice guides, which are meant to translate a huge body of research into educators' hands. And so there was a research in brief on this specific topic done by the Regional Education Laboratory West. It's relatively new, September 2021. And so we're going to really rely on that today for this presentation. Why does family engagement matter? Before we get into that, I wanted to note a shift that this brief called out, that there's been in the past, they say about 10 years, there's been a shift from focusing on just engagement to a focus on empowerment of parents, guardians, and caregivers. And this shift is important both conceptually, but also in terms of the programming you offer. So the family engagement model is built more around educators inviting families to participate in school-related activities. So it's kind of a, here we've done this thing, can you come in and be part of it? Family empowerment goes a step further and focuses on engaging families with information about their students' learning, about the school, and then empowering them with the tools, resources, and strategies to support their children's learning. So it's not just come to the school and get, but it's here's some practices you can do at home. Here's how you can help your student achieve their goals. The tools so they can be a partner in the learning in a way that goes beyond just the extent to which parents, guardians, caregivers are already partners. It also focuses on removing barriers and providing opportunities for families to gain agency and influence in their school community. And I think a lot of us probably wear two hats, right? We wear the hat of educator. I consider myself an educator too. I started as a teacher and I've been in education my whole career. So we wear the educator hat, and then many of us wear the parent hat or the grandparent hat or the foster parent hat or the aunt, uncle, cousin, caring, trusted adult hat. And when you're wearing that hat, sometimes it's hard to feel like you have a say in schools. They're kind of this entity, they do their own thing, it can be hard to speak up. And I feel that way sometimes, even though I'm clearly like I'm an educator with a lot of insider knowledge, and I'll still sometimes think, I just don't really have a way to have a voice in schools. So I think as educators, it's good to just always remember how much that's probably amplified for a lot of our families in our schools and in our districts. And to be cognizant of it, not just be aware of it, but be thinking, how can we remove barriers and how can we help create that the agency and influence, real, true agency and influence for the school community. And then the last piece about family empowerment, the research does show that it can improve academic outcomes for children who are typically underserved and whose backgrounds are underrepresented in the schooling process. And just as a process note, anytime in here when it says can improve or whatnot, that means the research in brief has cited one or more studies that prove or have some degree of evidence that engaging in this activity leads to, causes the outcome of interest. And speaking of that, here is just a couple of the highlights on family engagement and empowerment. Children achieve more academically when their families are positively engaged in the schools they attend. This finding is, I'm sure, surprising to no one. This is actually a really enduring finding in education, which is surprising because sometimes things move around. It's hard to, like I said, research is science. The evidence changes over time. This is a pretty enduring finding. Children from socioeconomically disadvantaged and or racial and ethnic minority backgrounds tend to benefit the most from having parents involved. So it said another way, the children whose parents may face the most barriers to getting involved are the children who would benefit the most from having their parents involved. And then engaging low-income and underserved families may reduce barriers to children's learning, especially when the schools initiate the communication and design strategies to work side by side with them. So when I read through this brief, read through the research, that was what I walked away with, is shifting our mindset as educators from how do we get parents to come in and do our thing to how do we work with parents side by side? How do we change the power dynamic? How do we make the school a place that is a shared space as opposed to a place where we're trying to get them into? And on that point, the research is showing that families really need specific tools and supports. And there has been a good deal of research on school-initiated programs that help create that side-by-side involvement in students' learning. So there's 4 were mentioned that have been studied. One is structured reading programs, where there's reading that happens at school and at home with, specific tasks. That there has been good outcomes for that, because again, it empowers parents with tools to be part of the academic gains their students are making. Programs that help to create collaboration between families and teachers as equal partners. So there's different programs out there that, again, kind of reduced the power dynamic and created better collaboration. Programs that did daily homework checks in some meaningful way, parents as partners in the academic learning, and then teacher to family communication that is two-way. A little bit on the barriers, I'll go through these bullet points, but I think the overarching thing is it is easy for people to say, oh, we see certain families in the school less, or we see certain families engaging in ways that we expect them to less, and make their own decisions about why that is. And that's a bias check, and that we need as educators to kind of check that. And I hear that so often. People say, I don't see this parent, and so then I'm going to assume that they don't care. And adding some more information to this equation, historically underserved families often have lower rates of engagement. This all has been studied. So what the studies show is there's lower rates of engagement for historically underserved families in their children's schools, usually due to feelings of isolation, being ignored, or feeling unwelcome in the school community. Moreover, many families have negative school experiences, or they've encountered racism, classism, and rejection in those school communities. So again, if we just look at how many parents came to the book fair and we're always gathering data as humans, we might come to some conclusions about who was there and who wasn't there without understanding reasons why people might not be there. None of us want to be in places where we're being rejected or discriminated against. And so thinking about your kids and your families, thinking about yourself and how you are in those spaces, and remembering that is part of family engagement, that it's a bigger picture than just what you're seeing, who shows up on the door at any certain event. There's also this power differential. So schools hold a lot of power, principals hold power, teachers hold power, school leaders, all of that. And how those power dynamics, it can be hard for parents, caregivers, families to engage through those power dynamics. And then there is some specific research on Hispanic Latinx families that it's just what I said, that there's this deficit thinking. So if the educators have like an implicit bias to think, oh, well, this is why they're not here. It's because they're not invested, as opposed to, I want to make sure all of the parents and families are able to be engaged and empowered, and let's work on that from a asset model, not a deficit model. This, again, is kind of an obvious statement, but the research shows immigrant families have a lot of particular barriers, language barriers, different, again, all the barriers above. So if you serve a school population that has a lot of immigrant families, has a lot of families from historically underserved communities, you have to be thinking about all of these pieces regularly, which is the point of this presentation. Key strategies. There are some specific things you can do. Again, it's not just all research onto, change overall social dynamics and good luck with that. There are some specific strategies that you can work on to increase empowerment that research suggests are positive. Returning to this empowerment idea, it means shared decision making. So how do you create the right kind of family and school connections? You want to create spaces where you are listening, you're welcoming, and there's a chance to do some shared decision making. So this might be parent councils, this might be proactively around the child goal setting at the start of the year. I think there's models out there, but it's also different schools set it up differently based on how their families are. But something that's a genuine shared decision making with the families, as opposed to just here's the rules, follow them, or here's the situation, follow it. And then I know educators do focus on this. I also know time gets in the way, but moving beyond communication only when something is wrong. And we all know, schools do a lot of good with newsletters and weekly emails home and whatnot, but that's not the same as the more personalized communication, targeted communication about your child. And those things do tend to only come when something is wrong. And again, acknowledging staffing constraints, but know that the more you can do a little bit to move communication beyond when something is wrong, that helps with empowerment. Let's break this down by individual, relational, and organizational levels. Okay, so some individual level strategies. I already mentioned this. This really hit home with me when I read this research too, that one of the key things that comes up in the research, and one of the key things that we know as educators is we need to do some self-reflection about our personal biases. What do we think when we haven't seen a family, or when they show up in a certain way, or when, we can't, I don't know. There's a lot of pieces that we might think of. We have to do our self-reflection about personal biases, and then engage in that professional learning, that targeted development for ourselves to attack those biases and not let them become our reality. Always demonstrating that sensitivity to family values, cultural differences, and characteristics. One of the key suggestions from the research is conducting home visits so you can become familiar with the cultural diversity in the school. And I was thinking about this too. Again, the home visit isn't for you to go in with your particular way that you were raised and evaluate the extent to which it's the same or different. The purpose is for you to go in with an open mind and heart and understand about the child, their family, their background, what's valued, how they put together their time, how they make their family unit. And so then you'll have a better sense of what that layout is for your school and for your classroom. And then the other one that I really liked was providing opportunities for families to share about their educational experiences. So in the home visits, or having parents come in and share, having things, creating venues where it's a two-way flow of communication. It's not just this is what school is, but it's understanding family experiences. And then holding yourself accountable as a school and as an individual. What are your goals? What are your family engagement goals? And what data are you going to track to know if you're getting that? Is it number of calls home? Is it number of visits? Is it a survey? But have some data. Don't just kind of do family engagement into the wind and hope for the best. Some relational strategies. So initiate that ongoing two-way communication. Again, the research suggests that the two-way means both ways, but that it often needs to start with the school saying, hey, we want to have two-way dialogue, and here's some questions, and here's some pieces of that. There's a whole body of research that I didn't repeat here about dual capacity building strategies to support family and school partnerships. Just that there are different programs out there that are built on a dual capacity building model, which means you're building the capacity of the school personnel, educators, and you're building the capacity of the family. So if that's something you want to use, again, I just encourage you to do a little bit of searching for different programs, but those dual capacity strategies are supported by research. Creating opportunities for social networks of support. There's research showing that families from diverse backgrounds there's research showing that what families really want or find the most valuable in this engagement is talking to each other. So creating those family networks. And then there's additional research to show that families from diverse backgrounds might feel more comfortable hearing from other families than from school staff. So this might be creating parent networks or time for parent networking. It might also be finding families who are already kind of empowered, feeling empowered, who could then communicate to other families. Different schools at different times have used this kind of parent outreach coordinator. And again, staffing can be an issue, but just always know with this research when we bring it forward, it's to help you prioritize. You can't do everything. You don't have all the resources. So if you're going to do one or two things, know that having a parent who is from the community you're trying to reach or is kind of a peer role, like peer for other parents, is a helpful strategy in terms of creating those social networks of support. Be proactive in establishing trust. I already mentioned this once, but teachers do bear the responsibility of reaching out and initiating that communication. And again, ideally before something's wrong. So how do you as a teacher, open the lines for that communication in thinking multiple modalities? It's not just curriculum night. It's not just an email. How can you make sure every parent in your class knows that you're there and you're available and can be part of goal setting with their child? And then finally, at the organizational level, at the school level, offering professional development to school administrators, to yourself, to teachers, and to staff on family engagement. This is, we've done another research into action on family engagement. This is the second one, but GVSU has a large catalog of professional learning with engagement included, family engagement included in there. So if this is an area of focus for you, do some of that professional learning. Adapting school practices to ensure access and agency for all families. This is, I think, part of the conversation that's been going on for a while. When do you hold activities? How do you have a translator? Do you communicate about them through a translator? How do you expect parents to be able to read an email or get a phone call? You just know that if you as a school keep holding things at one time a day and you only communicate about it in a couple ways, you aren't going to tap into the kind of parent engagement and parent empowerment that you want, parent and family empowerment that you want for your school. Support families to guide their children's learning from preschool to high school. So that kind of long-range planning, getting parents involved early, thinking about how things go together, how they'll progress through the system, whether it's all the way, if you have a K-12 system, all the way through your system, or when those points are where they're going to need to think about transitions. Be sure to understand that there is, and and convey to your staff that there's this link between family and community engagement and student learning. So we're not just engaging to engage, we're engaging in support of student learning. We like to close these always with a couple bits of practical advice because there's a lot of information. So first things first, take stock. How are you doing this right now? How do you currently engage and or empower parents? What are you doing well? What could be improved? If you watch any other research in action, you know I say often pick one strategy to try this next school year and one data point to evaluate it. If you picked one of these practices and really focused on it, see if you can move the needle on your family engagement, family empowerment. And then the last thing, just a big reminder, checking those biases. I think it's really hard as a human and it's hard as an educator. You get tired, it's stressful, and it's easy to default back into biases you didn't even know you had, implicit biases, explicit biases. So engaging in that, understanding, checking, getting in the habit of questioning why you assume what you assume, and trying not to assume, and definitely not assuming about motives. Never assume motives, and just kind of engaging in that self-reflective practice every day while tiring will be a really important part for you finding the right strategies going forward. Thank you for listening today.